appreciate everyone being here. And let's get it going. We'll introduce ourselves. We'll go through all the items on the agenda, and yeah, just leave it at that. So I'm Jeff Landau. I'm with the Contra Costa County Racial Justice Coalition, and I'm a steering committee member. I'm also a public defender in Contra Costa, but I'm sitting on this group. This subcommittee is a member of the Racial Justice Coalition. So let me invite Kiki to say hello to everyone.
Good afternoon. I'm Kiki Ferris. I am the Director of Specialty Field Services for Contra Costa County Probation, and I will be continuing as the Chief's proxy on this subcommittee.
Awesome. Thanks, Kiki. Renell.
Yeah, Ronell Ellis, Field Operations Coordinator for Health Right 360 Reentry Network, and just glad to be here as usual and trying to make an impact.
Thanks, Renell. Gigi. Hi.
Hi, I'm the Executive Director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Contra Costa.
Let's see. Ed Randall.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ed Randall, Contra Costa Probation, the Director of Field Services. Pleasure to see everybody.
Glad you're here. Malkia Crowder. Hi.
Hello, my name is Malkia Crowder. I'm the Director of Facilities.
Glad you're with us. Let me invite Patrice.
Hi, everyone. Patrice Guillory here from the Office of Office of, what is my office name? Office of Reentry and Justice. It's been a long day. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you too. Let's see, let me invite Denise to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Zabkevich. I'm the Research and Evaluation Manager with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Let's see. Hi, Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris James, the W. Haywood Burns Institute.
And let's see, can I invite Jill to say hello?
Sure, Jill Ray with Supervisor Candace Anderson's office. And I'm glad I'm not the only one messing those ones up, Patrice.
We're in good company here. We know we're here at least at this meeting. We're good. Hi, Jill. And Alyssa, hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Elisa Robinson with the Office of Supervisor Diane Burgess.
Glad you're here. Tamara.
Hi, everyone, and it's Tamra, and my name is Tamra Gusman Taylor, and I'm a probation manager of the institute.
Hi, Tamara. Sorry about that. Glad you're here.
Okay. That's okay.
Let's see. Mike Newton. Hi.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Mike Newton. I work at a probation department. I'm the assistant chief over juvenile facilities, staff development, and professional services. And thank you for allowing me to join today.
Absolutely. Glad you're here. Let me hand it over to Melvin Russell. Hi.
Afternoon, Melvin Russell with the probation department.
Probation showing up today, which isn't to say that probation doesn't always, but yes, in force today. Glad you're here. Let me invite Tamani to say hi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tamani Drew. I use she, hers, or they, them pronouns, and I'm coming from the Young Women's Freedom Center in Contra Costa. Thank you for having us.
Glad you're here. Let me hand over to Egypt. At least what I have on my screen is Egypt. Hi.
Yeah, hi, my bad. My camera is doing a slow thing right now, but my name is Egypt. Pronouns is she, her. I'm from Young Women's Freedom Center. I'm currently a youth organizer.
Hi, Egypt. Very glad you're here. All right, I think I've gone around our group. Has anyone not said hello? I think we had a chance to introduce ourselves. Well, glad that everyone's here. If you look at the chat, thank you, Patrice. Drop the agenda in there so you can see what we have coming up for today, what we're planning to make progress on. And given that we've gone through our introductions, I would propose to move to public comment now, unless anyone else on our subcommittee wishes to make an announcement. Okay, then let's open it up for public comment. Does anyone, member of the public, have something that they would want to address that's not on our agenda already? We'll have time to talk about the things that are on agenda, but if there's something that you'd like to address to the subcommittee, this is a good opportunity to bring that up. I like to pause for a moment, give folks a chance if they're feeling like they do want to say something. Okay. Don't feel like you've lost the chance if you were just about to unmute. There still will be one as we move forward. Try not to be too formal in these things, especially with a smaller group. So that, right, if you feel like you do want to speak on something, we'll make sure we can have that opportunity if at all possible. And it seems like it could be. Cheryl, I see you've joined. Hi. We're just finishing up with introduction, but let me invite you to say hi.
Hola, good afternoon, everyone. Cheryl Sades, Racial Justice Coalition Steering Committee and the Oversight Body. And yeah, whole lot more, but let's move on. I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Glad you're here, Cheryl. Okay, so we just have gone through the opportunity to public comment, and I think having not seen a hand raised at this point, that we can move to the next part of our agenda. And glad that we're moving along, getting lots of opportunity to hit the things that we have devoted to talking about today. So let's go to the record of actions from last time. And this is going to be on page 3 of 12 of our agenda packet. And just give folks a moment to look through, make sure that folks were here when they were here, and et cetera, all those parts. If anyone has points that they would want to correct, add, this is a good moment. So let's take that time for folks to look through. Right, I'll note that Youth Advisory Council, Sheriff Oversight Updates, Community Capacity Fund, those things were postponed to future meeting. That's not a change as much as just knowing that we talked about this at the quarterly, that had been an issue, our ability to take action on everything given all factors. But let me, I'll say we will be touching on our schedule moving forward, and that's kind of part of the discussion, I think. Having said that and running through this, does anyone have any proposed changes? And if not, is there a motion to approve the record of actions from last time?
Jeff, it's Kiki.
Yeah.
I would just note that, and I'm not seeing it, so please do correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
If there's no mention in last time's record of action that there actually was a discrepancy about what we meant by the ranch, because you have noted that first black bullet under number 6, that there was a proposal to close Marsh Creek, but remember that was a big item of discussion because I believe what the intention was a discussion about Orrin Allen.
Exactly,
and I just would
right.
want for maybe there to be a note in there that was actually an error on the agenda. And so, because we go on to say the ranch in quotes, but that's not actually what was discussed. Marsh Creek wasn't discussed. So I would just like to see that clarified, please.
You're
And-
absolutely right. That's a good point. Yes.
And I would just add to that in the beginning of the announcements, I did correct the OAYRF was in Byron, California, but that I also stated that it wasn't Marsh Creek. So I think it's probably best what Kiki said to have that under the Marsh Creek item, the correction that it was misappropriately titled on the agenda.
I recall that as well, Jill, thank you. Yes, so it was Jill who spoke up. So maybe that should be actually one of the first bullets under that section, is that there was a clarification made.
Yes.
And
I
I would hope that it would also be added, because I think it was important and significant that there was nobody from probation at this meeting because of it being named wrong, to be able to answer to that agenda item.
Well, to that point, there were several members from probation that were at the meeting.
Not from that division. The person who could respond to the questions was not present. That was, as I recall, Kiki, that was what happened.
Right, and I'm sorry to cut you off. You're right. I think my very first comment was actually to that effect, that we did not know that Orrin Allen was to be discussed, and therefore there was no one from our institutional division here to address that issue.
Well, I appreciate that point. So to say that there was no one from the institutional division of the probation department present, that sounds like that's accurate and should be included. So I certainly don't dispute that. And maybe to touch on this point for a moment is we didn't have much discussion about it last time, other than my indicating that I wanted to try to create a space there, with knowing there hadn't been a specific invitation to make a proposal, or a presentation rather, at the last meeting. That there's been a vote that's taken by the Board of Supervisors on the matter since the time. I think it was Chris and I had talked about it in advance of this meeting, suggesting that probation could make a presentation if they wish to, but it seems that that ship has sailed, so to speak, in terms of there being action taken. But want to make sure that all the partners in this discussion are feeling that this was, I suppose, fair play moving forward, right? We're all partners in the process. And I can say that certainly it was my intention on having the matter on the agenda, not to confuse the issue with Marsh Creek. And to the extent that that was not giving everyone here an opportunity to weigh in and speak on the matter, then I take responsibility for that for sure. And also, it was my expectation that there would be representatives from probation present at the meeting, and that we would all have access to the agenda and the opportunity to speak on any points. So
Can I just
wanted to-
ask a point of
Please.
order here? Because I believe this is the item is to approve the minutes. And then I just think that there's just been comments on just a couple of additions to the minutes to clarify that subject. So I'm not sure if you're adding to the minutes, the suggestion something be added to the minutes. So I'm just trying to just understand where we are on the agenda.
Sure. Your point is well taken, Jill. I can stop addressing it further. And I think we've had proposed additions, changes to the minutes to reflect that the captioning of the facility as the ranch, as Marsh Creek, was in error, and that Jill had pointed this out during the meeting, that in fact it was in Byron and that the ranch was miscaptioned, and also that there was no one from the probation's institutional division that was present at the meeting. Are there other, or does that accurately capture the changes to be made? Does anyone have, oh yes, please.
I was just gonna say that captures my addition, and then I was just, Kiki, does that capture your addition as well?
Yes, I just want to be real clear, Jeff, please, that that the addition includes that the intention was to have Orrin Allen Youth Rehabilitation Facility on the agenda, but instead, this was the error. So, because that kind of leads into why there was, kind of an unplanned discussion and no one from the institution present. So I just want to be clear about what the intention actually was.
I think you're absolutely right in how you stated it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so with that clarification, are there any other proposed changes to the record of actions from last time? All right, seeing nothing further, is there a motion to approve the record of actions from last time?
I'll make the motion to approve the record of action.
Thank you, Gigi. And second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Renell. All right, is there any further discussion on the item before we take a vote? Not seeing any, I think we're ready to take a vote.
All right, Jeff,
Yes.
Renell,
Yes.
Kiki,
Yes, as amended. Thank you.
and Gigi.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, then. On to our next item of business. This would bring us to the standing agenda item for JJCC updates. Kiki, can I hand to you, or whoever may be most appropriate from probation? Let me invite.
Sure. Ms. Malkia Crowder, who's the Director of Institutions, is here. And I would just note that I have no subcommittee updates because that meeting preceded our last meeting here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize that I do not have a PowerPoint prepared because we did not receive adequate time to prepare that. So I can give you information on the community track, it's community pathway or the community track. And if you have questions, we can definitely dialogue and I can answer the questions that you need be. If there is something that I cannot answer, I'll put my information in the chat and I'm more than willing to have further conversations with you about the community pathway. So as you all know, on November 1st, the Board of Supervisors voted to close our Arn Allen Youth Rehabilitation Facility in Byron. With that being said, we have devised a community track program. It's called our Community Path / our Community Pathway. And what that is the youth that would have originally been sentenced to the ranch will now be in the community with wraparound services. So instead of going to the ranch, they will be placed back into their home. They will not be coming into custody. They'll be placed back into their home. They will be connected with Embrace. They will be connected with one of the men from 100 years to have mentorships. We will provide all of the cognitive evidence-based programming out in the community. Our staff, we will initially staff that with 5 of our deputy probation officers and 3 juvenile institution officers. And what we know is that the youth will need to have intensive supervision. So we will be seeing those youth 7 days a week. We currently have 12 youth at the ranch, Arn Allen, and the tentative plan is to close the doors on the ranch on January 31st. At that time, we will only have 2 youth that have not completed their full treatment. Those 2 youth will go on to the community pathway. The community pathway is a collaboration with our CBOs that we currently work with, and then additional CBOs and community and 100 years. I think just to be clear, the youth will not be coming into custody. I think that was a lot of confusion on initially when we devised the plan, we had the youth coming and they were being placed on our Tamalpais unit. The youth will not be going into custody. They will be going in the community. They will go to their community schools, which also gives them the opportunity to be with their families. We can start the their counseling and the rehabilitation much sooner than we could at the ranch. And they also could participate in extracurricular activities because, as you know, once they're placed at the ranch, they're removed from their families, which is sometimes it's a long distance, and they cannot participate in extracurricular activities. So what this is going to be is really an extensive treatment program where we're hoping that the youth will get all the services in the community. Now, I know a lot of people are saying that, there's no data. No, we do not have data. And nothing is foolproof. So there are going to be things that we're going to have to tweak along the way. But I think as a community, we need all of our stakeholders at the table and supporting this program and supporting these youth who are minorities, so they're coming from minority communities, they're coming from far away. And so they're going to need a lot of resources. So that is our community pathway program. If you guys have questions, again, I apologize for not having any nice, cute slides. But I did want to clarify that the youth will not be coming into juvenile hall.
Thank you, Malkia, for giving us that introduction and presentation. So I know that we have several hands. Let me go first to Gigi.
Thank you, and for taking my call, Malkia, to kind of give me more in-depth understanding of what this Community Pathways project would be like. I'm pretty hopeful about more positive outcomes and not, caging young people, but instead keeping them in the community. I do want to know if you guys have made any arrangements for family involvement, recognizing that the bulk of the young people have been identified as living with mental health challenges. So what their treatment plans, I'd rather call them treatment plans than rehab plans, what their treatment plans include referrals to mental health providers, and what their family members also get support to improve the potential outcomes for the young individuals. Thanks.
Absolutely. So actually we call them case plans, Gigi. I might have said rehabilitation, but we call them case plans, and each individual will have an individual treatment plan. So we'll have an MDT meeting, and then we'll discuss the individual needs of each youth. And then at that point, it will decipher what each youth needs on an individual basis. And so we're with Coffee Embrace, and they're going to be providing that counseling.
Coffee Embrace, I've never heard of them. Are they a culturally reflective group of using community defined strategies and all?
So their coffee is oh gosh, I can't even think. I can't think of the name of what is coffee. What's the name of coffee? Kiki, do you remember?
Community options for family and youth. And you're talking about the Embrace part, that acronym I can't remember off the top of my head.
So are they culturally and ethnically reflective of the youth in their staffing pattern?
I don't know, Gigi. I would have to look. I would probably say I'm assuming they would be, but I can't give you that answer. I can definitely look and see, because I know that there is a need. That is definitely a need. And I am a big advocate also in the institution. I'm a big advocate that we need people that look like our clientele that we serve. So I am definitely aware and open to having further conversations with you if they cannot meet the needs of the clients that we serve.
And their families. Thank you.
And their families.
Thanks.
Yes. You're welcome.
I appreciate that exchange back and forth. So I'm glad we had that comment and response. Let me invite Tumani. I saw your hand next.
Thank you. So how can we ensure that youth will not get probation violations if if there's this intensive check-in with probations, how will we make sure that the violations won't result with them inside the system, go back to juvenile hall?
I don't think I understand your question. So you're saying if they get violated, they won't go back into juvenile hall?
Yeah, I'm saying how can we make sure this program, Community Pathways, with them, the probation officers checking on them constantly, 7 days, you said, or?
Yes, we'll be contacting them 7 days. So typically, we very rarely violate for probation violations. So the purpose of them checking on them and working with them intensively is so that they can have support. So it's not to, see if they're violating or find something. We know that when they're in the community, they're going to need to be seen and touched and, way more often than they currently are now. So that's the purpose of us seeing them 7 days a week, whether it's we're going to be doing cognitive evidence-based programming twice a week. We're going to be having them partner with 100 Years, and they'll be out doing extracurricular things. So we know from our past experiences that the more that they're seen and the more that they're touched and the more people are paying attention to them, they're more successful.
Okay, so it won't lead to probation violations?
No, that's not the intent.
Okay.
Thank you for that question and answer. I think my hand was next in line, and then we'll continue to respond to answer questions from those others. I see Jill in Egypt also. So I guess my reflection of the concerns that were raised at the meeting last time were less that the people that are currently, the young people that are currently at the Orrin Allen facility would be moved to the hall, as much as what happens moving forward. The judge is hearing the situation, there's the allegation, and the judge says, well, this is serious and we need to have a real serious response. How will the removal of Orrin Allen as a facility, does that mean the people that were going to be going to Orrin Allen, now they're going to be going to community? Or will the judge say, well, I don't have this intermediate step, so I'm going to send this person to the hall? And is there a way, and I would think it would be important to be able to track the rate of when cases go in front of the judge. Is the judge having the hall as the disposition, or what ends up happening? Is that happening more often after this change? Or is it that, no, the young people that were going to be going to Orrin Allen, as it turns out, they are going to community and home? And basically how the judges will respond to this and the outcomes. So that's something I would, please.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I honestly can't speak to how the judge, is going to respond or what their disposition will be. We can only make the recommendation. And so we're going to be clear on, what our recommendations are. And just to clarify, just to go back to the question about the 7 days a week, as Jill put in the chat, it's not to catch the youth or to try to get a violation. Again, it's really to provide whatever resources and services that they need. As we said before, we've had the home supervision program many years ago. I worked there for 5 years. And, it was really to go out and check on the youth and just know that someone was checking on them and working with them and working with the family. And I think just adding the 100 Years and the mentorship, is really big, because in the past, we didn't have that buffer. So the plan now is to, sometimes kids are beyond the parental control. So instead of calling probation, what we're wanting them to do is call the mentors. The mentors can go and to provide some type of mentorship and be that in between before probation actually intervenes. So just to be clear, we're not checking on them 7 days a week to try to look for something or to violate them. That is not the goal of this program.
Thank you for that response and addition, and your answer to what I had raised, it's true and important to note that the ultimate decision is going to be the judge, and that probation can't make that finally. And knowing that, I think what I'm really proposing is that this be tracked carefully to determine what has been the result of the change, and in particular having that broken down by race so that we can know who's getting the benefit of the community track, and is that being disproportionately something available to white youth as opposed to youth of color moving forward. So
definitely,
we'll all be eager to know how this rolls out.
Definitely. We will definitely be keeping data.
Thanks very much. Let me turn it over to Jill, please.
I would just add to that the Juvenile Justice Commission did ask for data tracking, and ISA did promise that with the new probation system, data system, that the platform, that was something that they could track is what the recommendation was versus the disposition going forward. So that was already asked and promised in this whole thing, because I think it is important to note. And it is also, you know, tracking recidivism, because as you know, there was just a recent item that Isa presented showing that the recidivism rate for those children who were at the ranch is really, really bad. So everybody was saying it was just such a great program and it's averting recidivism, and the reality is data doesn't show that. So, and you know, my boss personally is very excited about this program, because the goal is to keep them in community, wrap them in services so that they don't continue on into the adult justice system, because that's the goal. Is we don't want to continue to incarcerate them. So, and then my other question was, my actual question was, Malkia, so the youth that are there that are going to transition to the community track program, I'm curious what the feedback from the youth and the families are about this opportunity come the end of January.
So we just informed the staff of what was going on. So we wanted to make sure we informed the staff. We wanted to make sure that we had a clear plan. And so we will be meeting with the families, the two families of the youth who will transition into the community and try and provide the wraparound services and whatever services prior to them being released on January 31st. And just to your comment, in 2019, the recidivism rate was 72%. In 2020, it was 54%. And in 2021, it was 76% for the ranch. So just to give you guys the facts.
Thank you for that additional information. I'm wondering how that does relate to the recidivism rate for those that are sent to the halls and as a opposition. Is there information readily available on that?
It's not readily available as of right now, but I can get that information.
Well, I'm not making a formal request. I'm just trying to get a sense of how do we digest the rate of recidivism? Is it worse there than at the other option of the hall? But for consideration, right? Thank you. There was another hand. I think that was Egypt next.
Yeah, so my question is for the setup for the what you call it, track?
The community?
Yes, the track or whatever. So basically is a setup like basically being in a STRTP, but a intensive care foster home with the intensive care foster home services. Because intensive care, because in intensive care foster homes, you actually are provided with a wrap services team, which is why I'm asking that question. And in certain group homes, they allow you, in certain STRTPs, they allow you to go outside the community, well, inside their community, to go to school and stuff like that, and they monitor you throughout. That's what it sounds like to me.
So if I might, Malkia. So I'm responsible for our juvenile investigations and our placement and prevention services under probation. So placement in and of itself requires a very specific court order with very specific criteria and findings by the court. So what Malkia is describing are situations where our goal would be to actually preserve the family unit under the community pathway and allow youth, instead of being incarcerated or in custodial settings, to engage in services and intensive supervision while they are remaining in the home with their natural supports, parents, legal guardian, caregivers. What you're describing is a placement setting, and that requires removing the child from the home of the parent or legal guardian because there is some detriment in the home setting. So that is actual entry into foster care. So any kind of intensive family, any type of IFFC, home-based placement or STRTP, which used to be called group homes, that requires a very specific foster care order and findings by the court. So that's something entirely different than what we're describing on the community track, which involves you as a child remaining with your home, with your natural support and caregiver to receive probation services.
Okay, now that you said that, I kind of understand what you're saying, but basically, I'm only saying like the question I'm really trying to ask, so they're going to be in basically a group home with intensive care services, not inside of a intensive care home, but the services, because me personally, with my experience, I have wrap services still to this day. And that's basically what I was getting when I was in the intensive care home. So that's why I had asked y'all, ain't that what it's kind of like?
No, so it's not a group home slash short-term residential treatment program at all. That is foster care. We are providing services to youth who remain with their parent or guardian. We actually provide, just as a sub note, we provide wrap services to all children right now who need it and are eligible. We have our own contracts. We've been providing it for years. So regardless of whether you're in placement or an IFC home or at home with your parents, youth who need wrap services are provided wrap services. That's something that's been in place for many, many moons under probation. But I understand what you're saying, but what you're describing is a placement foster care situation, and that's not what this is. This is not involving, we don't want to have youth entered into the foster care system either, unless that is what they absolutely need. So this is a step down from even that kind of setting. So you're not removed from your home and placed into foster care unless there is a significant, concern in the family setting. So that's something completely different than what we're describing.
So it's like they will be at home with wrap services and probation
Exactly.
instead. Okay, that makes sense.
Absolutely. So preserving the family, if you think about it that way, we don't want to remove you from the home to be in custody. We also don't want to remove you in the home just to send you to somebody else's home. We want you to be at home with your family, with your natural supports, receiving the services and the supervision that you require. That's it.
Thank you for the understanding.
Good clarification back and forth there. Glad we had that exchange. I think it's Denise and then to Chris. Hope I'm right in that.
Thanks, Jeff. We've had discussions in various meetings, this one as well as the JJCC, surrounding tracking data on the court recommendations and dispositions as a result of, some of these changes. And I just want to throw out there that I personally and professionally have some concerns about that, and the perception that our office, whether that be the ORJ or probation, be in a situation of a perception of monitoring the court and monitoring the judges in their decision making. And that is what, when I think about the data that has been asked from various committees, that's what it looks like to me, is that we're looking at what is the disposition that gets recommended by probation, what is the disposition that gets recommended by the DA and the public defender, and how does that compare with what the court disposition is. And it sends the message to me and a possible perception to the court that we are monitoring them. And I'm not so sure that any of us want to have that perception, although I think there are, reasons obviously that you have and others have surrounding why we might want to do that. And if the chief is on board with moving in that direction, well, then certainly, we will. But I think there's big concern about sending that message. And I just wanted to share that with you in this committee.
Thank you, Denise, for passing that on and expressing that. I know it gets a little complicated with responding back and forth. I guess my instinct with that, frankly, is, well, why not be monitoring the court? I mean, I'm not imagining criticizing yet the court or reprimanding the court, but to know what's happening in the system, it's also should be holding everybody accountable. If the public defender is not asking for, or they're asking for whatever it is, well, then we have our part to play in the process. But I do think it's monitoring all of us is going to be necessary if we're going to make progress in policy. That's at least my take on it. So I know that there's more to be said, and I invite you, I just said something, so let me invite you, Denise, if you want to say in response.
Yeah, in a political world, I would say yes, but I think I think it would be important to get the court on board with an evaluation along these lines. And that would be my recommendation, rather than just moving forward and seeking data to try to answer these questions, but to get buy-in from the court to see what their participation in this, because there may be other mechanisms.
Can I just clarify something here, Denise? I understand what you're saying. The ask came from the Juvenile Justice Commission, which is an advisory body to the courts. There's the judge of the juvenile division sits with the Juvenile Justice Commission. They meet monthly and they have closed sessions. So if anybody feels that the data is privileged or not something that the public should see, it allows for the collection of the data and for the Juvenile Justice Commission, who works with the court, to look at the data and figure out what trend lines are. And the concern is the kids that normally would be going to the ranch would be incarcerated instead. It's an important thing to track, and it doesn't have to be done through this body or any other body, because it came from the Juvenile Justice Commission. And Issa said it's a great idea and she absolutely supports it. And so however it's tracked and however it's monitored, I think it's important. And so I don't think we need to worry about what the courts have to say about it, because they were sitting in the conversation when that was done. So
perfect. Thank you, Jill, for that important piece of information. Thank you.
Yes.
If I could interject.
Thank you. Mike, was there something? But
yeah, I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. Thank you, Jeff. Just in support, I think, of what Denise is trying to bring light to, is that we don't want to misrepresent the fact that the data belongs to the court, and there's certain welfare and institution code restrictions that make it have to run through the court before the dissemination of data goes out and the sharing of data, but certainly the tracking of data internally and having the ability to look at trends and report to the court on trends and stuff like that is certainly something that nobody would deny is a good idea. It's just that we don't have the liberty of releasing data and reporting back to, say, this body without the court's approval. So I think just saying that so that everybody kind of knows where we're coming from. So later on down the road, people don't say, well, you're just trying to, not report on data.
Thanks, Mike,
for adding that. Let me invite Chris to speak.
Thanks. I think this is kind of related and almost to some degree answered with the previous discussion, but I'm curious what the buy-in has been, in terms of communication directly to the courts about this and, their role in referring you to this program as opposed to the ranch, and particularly if there is any forum where more information can or should be delivered, and if there's any role for us to play in, at least the members of the body, right? Like not necessarily members of the ORJ, in supporting that in some way, if that would be appropriate or if there are opportunities for that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, is there opportunities to talk with the judge about the recommendation? So I think at this point, the community pathway is going to be up and running. We have buy-in from the Board of Supervisors. We have buy-in from the bench. So as of right now, we are not having any more forums on what we're doing with the community track. If people have ideas, or we do have a stakeholder meeting with some of our stakeholders, but we're not having any more forums on the community track. And yes, the judge, the bench, it has bought in to the program and is aware of the program prior to us even bringing it out to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and answer. Cheryl, I think I had your hand next.
Yes. A couple of things. I'm just going to say this because I agree with Jeff about the monitoring. I just want to underscore that people don't perform to what we expect, but what we inspect. So I say we inspect those numbers always. There's a reason we have this oversight body, and we have this oversight body because of that, these glaring discrepancy in the number of Black and brown youth that are overrepresented in the criminal, legal, and criminal punishment system, plain and simple. And we keep trying to put pretty colors over it and pretty words to try and explain why. And with this new development and what we're doing in the juvenile punishment system, I think the program is great. I think it's wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Marquia, for explaining it. I think it's great, but it does leave this glaring ability of humans, particularly judges, to make a decision that is going to tunnel more youth back into the system if they make the wrong decision for these youth, because you're taking out an option. And that is what was made loud and clear at the last meeting and at the Board of Supervisors meeting. So we can't just like ignore that and act like it doesn't exist. So we need the ability to track that. We need the ability to make sure we're paying attention and to bring it to the attention of not just probation but to the judges themselves, that there's a trend that seems to be happening here with particular youth, whether there's Black youth, brown youth, or low income youth, which doesn't have a color to it, right? Or youth in a particular part of the county. So we need to be looking at all of that, because sometimes it might not have something to do with color, which in this case, most of the time it does. It might have something to do with where they live. So we need to be looking at all of that, or whether they're male or female. My query to you is, we've been hearing about wraparound services, a lot of that. And I was listening to Ms. Gigi earlier and Ms. Tamani, something came to mind. What kind of services are we providing to these families? Because all I kept hearing from the children that I work with, especially Alliance for Girls, is a lot of these girls kept saying when the pandemic first hit that they didn't feel safe at home. And so when you're taking youth who don't feel safe at home, and regardless of what else is going on, we can say all day long that home is the best place, but if they don't feel safe at home, what services are we providing to the families to make sure that they, or the guardians, whoever they are, that they can help change the dynamics, or that they can help their children grow and become the potential that we may see in them. So what services is one thing to provide mental health care, physical care, school, help them participate in extracurricular. But if we're not doing that as a whole unit and making sure we're checking on the family unit as well, not all together, but sometimes separating them, having the youth here and the families themselves to make sure they have what they need mentally, psychologically, physically, then you're still sending them back into this pattern of recidivism. So what are we doing to make sure that that is occurring for the families themselves, especially for the adult who is responsible for these children?
So I totally agree with your first comments about data. And, you know, I know from the color of my skin, you can see that I am African-American. So I have firsthand experience with the system and with the disparities. And, you know, we have all these groups and we talk about disparities, but sometimes it's more of, let's go out there and do the work. We know there's disparities, and we know that Black and brown youth are, you know, overrepresented way before they come to probation. And also we work with families. So we'll have coffee, and as Ms. Gigi said, they do not have any Black African-American men in leadership on coffee, but we do work with the families, but sometimes families don't want to be involved. So we can send a referral and we can, do everything that we can. And we're trying really hard to work with the families and give them their services before they even come out of custody. But, Cheryl, there is no like golden spoon. We have to all work together and provide resources and support one another. So if you know of something that I can provide the youth or something that I can provide the family, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk offline. But we know that there's disparities. We know that, it takes a lot. And we know as in African-American communities, anyone can't come in that home. You have to build a relationship. We have to resemble, we have to have some similarities. And sometimes we don't have that in the bigger system. So again, probation does not have all the answers. I am more than willing to sit and have conversations. I'm more than willing to talk further about other resources, because again, it takes the whole community if we want to have these kids come back to our communities and be successful.
Let's talk offline.
Okay.
Good exchange there. Let me invite, I think, Tumani and then Gigi. Am I right on that? Okay, please.
Thank you for everybody's question. I really appreciate this conversation. So my first question was about the recidivism rate. I would also like to know the comparison, and then like also would the recidivism rate indicate like the program, the success of the program? And then could we also know like how did it impact the youth? And then the other question was, the programs in the community pathway. Can we know what programs are scheduled for the community pathway? And then what's the ratio of like probation officers being in contact with the youth and like community stakeholders? Does that make sense? Like, would it be probation officers 7 days of the week, or is it gonna be like 3, 4?
Okay, so we can get you data, and I can definitely tell you. So some of the same, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ranch right now or in Allen and the programs that they have there. And if you're not, I can definitely provide you the information. But all of the same programming, Thinking for a Change, ART, Choices, Sabisa, advanced practices, all of those will be out in the community at the satellite offices. So it'll either be in West County or East County or Central County at a regional office. What was your other question?
Well, first, for the first question, so like,
you asked who will be seeing them. So it'll be a collaboration. So they'll be having treatment classes 2 days a week. They'll be with 100 years, a certain time of week, and then we will also be checking in with them.
Okay. All right. And then, yeah, for the recidivism rate, like, would the recidivism rate show the success levels of the program? And then if it's the same program,
Yeah, can I take this one for you?
Yeah, help me out.
So Tumani, what we're moving towards doing is drawing on programs that have an evidence base for them. And what I mean by that is that they have been shown to improve the quality of life and the well-being of the young person. We also have every intention of tracking within our department those kinds of outcomes for the youth that we are serving. Because just because the evidence base says that it's going to be good doesn't mean that it's going to be good. So because our community looks different than the community where the evidence or the research was conducted. So we're moving in that direction, with the goal being that we provide the youth with the proper match based upon various factors and needs with an evidence-based program, so that we can track over time the youth's well-being as well as their trajectory of justice involvement. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Thank
So
you.
the whole goal is to provide services that work, right? That's what we're
Right.
here for. And so we need to see, do they actually work? And we
Right.
haven't been able to do that yet, but we are moving in that direction quickly.
So there will be different from the ranch, because if the recidivism rate is high, then maybe those programs aren't successful, right?
Well, it depends upon the measure of what we're looking at, right? Because recidivism is a measure that is generally over time. Okay, and sometimes there's I will throw out, there's another measure that we can consider that is called desistance. And what that means is a different level of interaction with the justice system. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Thank you for that exchange. Let me invite Gigi, and just looking at our clock, I'm inclined to take, if there's no objections, to take Gigi's point on this as the last, and then we would transition to the next agenda item, but let me hand over to Gigi.
Thank you. I actually would raise my hand to talk about something different, but I have to speak about evidence-based practices because they're generally not normed on African-American male youth, and then they're not successful. We have been moving more toward community-defined practices, practices that have been proven to be true because they've been tested on the community using the values, cultural values, and the practices that have been proven to be successful with that group of individuals. So anytime I see something that says evidence-based practice, I don't picture Black youth. If it's medical, I don't picture African-American women when they start saying evidence-based practice. So I want to say that. I also want to say, since we're lifting up a new program and the ultimate goal of this work is to reduce the disparities, racial justice, right? Is to reduce the disparities and have better outcomes for young people who largely we know are living with unaddressed traumas and mental health unaddressed. We really have an opportunity to lift this program up with all the features we need. And sometimes it requires policies. So, and we need the policies from the top straight down. So all the judges and everyone have to be informed about the ultimate goal of why we're doing this. We're doing this because we recognize that some other jurisdictions have been successful at having a reduction in recidivism, and we want to have that here in Contra Costa County. So I'm hoping there has, maybe there are not going to be any more forums, but hopefully at the meetings that Jill spoke to, the judges are also on board. And perhaps because DA Becton has a new policy focused person, there'll be policies that will start addressing some of the racial bias that we see on who gets to go to juvenile hall versus who will stay at home. Because obviously in this county, the bias, the racial bias that happens at the point of contact with law enforcement, because we're saying they're not gonna be incarcerated at all, right? So that means we need law enforcement input, we need the court input, and we need the judges to be active participants in what we're all trying to achieve here. And if it's just being done in one department and not spread across the county, we're going to continue to have the same failures that we've had for African-American and Brown. I'm saying African-American because when you look at the population, and then I get a call and say, how many people are there today and what's their racial profile? I start with those who are most harmed, and it's Black young men. And so I'm hoping that all the partners are involved and that they all know what we're trying to accomplish. We're all on the same page, and we can measure success by a phone call to juvenile hall to see who's there. And if we see the number remaining the same, it's been a failure. Thanks.
Thank you, Gigi. And let me invite Patrice. I see your hand.
And I know you said, I'm going to respect the timing, and I know you mentioned that Gigi was the last comment. So
No,
I'll make it
please,
really
please.
quick, and thank you for giving me the privilege. I do want to, though, make a comment with regards to the evidence-based piece. And only because the Office of Reentry and Justice here, we have spent an enormous amount of effort to build up, especially on our adult reentry side, preparing our service providers to in fact move in a direction where there's service delivery is guided through research and is also data driven. So we've applied this sort of process with our housing and our employment providers, where they have the opportunity to look through clearinghouses of various evidence-based or evidence-based program models that have been rated effective across the country. And so they have the opportunity to look at some of the related settings and demographics of those individuals who received services through those specific program models. And then given the nuances, right, of Contra Costa County communities, we also provided them the opportunity to make minor adaptations that wouldn't deviate too far off from what the research has shared around that program model. So we have already started to go into practice of working with providers to identify program models that would in fact be effective and monitoring really closely the sort of similarity of demographics and characteristics of those clients that would in fact receive those resources, to then start measuring out how well they are doing in those respective services.
Thank you, Patrice. It was right on point.
And really quickly,
Yes,
one more
please.
thing. So that has not, that level of detail and effort and support that we've provided to our adult reentry providers has not translated yet to on the juvenile side. So we welcome that from community providers. This is certainly something that they also too would like to invest a lot more of their own internal capacity to really look at what in fact is working, what is effective, and helping us invest more dollars into the things that we know that work for these communities.
Thank you, Patrice. I think we're on the same page that if it's going to be effective in achieving the goals that we want, it's got to be tailored to the communities that we're dealing with and needs that we have. And it sounds like, as I'm hearing it, we've got consensus on that point, and it's how we get there, and we're all going to have to be part of the process to make sure that it sails through as it ought to. So with that, and seeing Jill's comment also in the chat, and knowing that the change in counties receiving youth who would have been at DJJ and what that will mean for the population of young people who will be in the juvenile system and also locally here is worthy of consideration as a factor. And we'll need to have that as part of the consideration of how this all moves forward also.
Yeah, just to clarify that, if we're going to look at juvenile hall population and we say, look, January or February, July or whatever, all of a sudden the population increases by a dozen more children, that doesn't mean that the community track program failed. Understanding that's when we're bringing back the rest of the DJJ population. So we just have to be really aware of that. And then also, Malkia, I didn't know if you wanted to say something about that, the community track program and girls.
Oh, to your comment. So with the community track, also, the ranch doesn't service girls. So with the community track, girls will be able to be serviced in this community track. And, just before we leave, we talk a lot about data, but sometimes like 100 years or people with lived experience, sometimes you can't track that. So everything is not about data. We're on these community subcommittees and we're talking about data this and data that, but sometimes we can't track data. If I have my 100 years dealing with someone else, it's a personal real life thing. So let's just understand these are real life people and everything is not about data. And I'm sorry, I know there's some data people here, but just understand that these are human beings. And sometimes you can't track success with data. You can track success by, I have my 100-year men's coming in here with lived experiences. They're sitting down talking to these young men and these young men is soaking that up. That to me is success. So let's just be really mindful that data is not 100% file proof. And with that, I am done. My number and my email is in the chat. If you want to reach out to me, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Malkia. And thank you all for comments on this. I know that there's more to say, and that's always the nature of our discussions. So we'll keep our close focus on this as it moves forward. And I'm going to transition, if I may, to our Youth Advisory Council updates. These are pages 6 through 10 of our agenda packet. And boy, we definitely need to also talk about community capacity funds, but also I'm kind of inclined to consider moving 7 above 6 so that we do talk about our meeting schedule when we don't run out of time to talk about that. That said, what's next in line is the Youth Advisory Council update. And Chris, is it all right for me to transition to you here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
I think, I think all of your points are well taken. I think you're doing a good job of keeping time. I didn't think we'd even end up talking about this, to be honest, the way the conversation was going, and rightfully so. So I will keep it short because this is just a brief update. So, you may have more time than you think to cover, the next couple of items. But really, this is just to say, obviously, one of the objectives of this group has been to try to establish, to develop and establish a youth advisory council, because we obviously do a lot of work or, want to make equitable decisions or recommendations, right, that impact young people, that is people, 18 and under in particular. And we generally tend not to have people who are 18 and under in attendance of these meetings, right? So trying to develop that space for their voices to be heard about things that will impact them, things that they may experience, being reflective of the population that is being served or that is being considered or impacted by any set of decisions, right? Sort of a larger, sort of ethos, right, or larger concept of our entire system of government and what the history of this country is supposed to be, right? Representation when you're impacted. So in trying to do all that, what we've been struggling with is trying to develop sort of a model with which to build some proposal language that is specific to what a youth advisory council might be able to do with this particular body to impact its decisions. And we were finally able to find something that was used, with Richmond City Council for, a proposal there as the starting point. So this is that, right? This is just to say that we have a draft of something that we can take and tweak and make our own as necessary. That process has not yet begun, but that we actually do have something to look at and to modify in the ways that will be responsive to what a youth advisory council should be. There is a smaller working group that will be taking a look at this to make some changes. It will be coming back to this group to hear you guys' input once some of those changes have been made. Certainly, if anybody is looking at this in this very brief amount of time or looked at it before, when the agendas went out, and you have feedback that you would like to offer, I would welcome that, but we don't have to have the entire discussion now. This is just to say, this is where we're going to start from, as opposed to trying to start from scratch. It's always better, I think, not to reinvent the wheel with things like this. And so this represents a step forward in having that proposal language for the actual recommendation. Once that part is finished, then we can go about the recruiting of youth for, actually holding space or hosting space for other young people to talk about what they would want and how they would want to participate, and what would, make, them more likely to participate in a council like this. And then figuring out from there who might actually be, a member of the council as well. So there's still a long way to go. This is the first stage, but glad to have a draft and not to be starting from scratch or trying to write proposal language. I think we've been caught up with that a time or two in other endeavors, right? Just trying to write stuff and then send it somewhere and people are saying, wait, what is this? This doesn't quite look like or doesn't quite meet the standard of what we're used to for a proposal. So I think we can probably avoid those kinds of issues by having, you know, a model to work from, and that's what this is.
Thanks, Chris. Helpful to have the context of what we're looking at and why we have this here and where we are in the process. So, right, this Richmond program is a model. The part of me is inclined to say, well, maybe we could invite someone who knows more about this program to present to us at a future meeting. And then there's another part of me is like, before we go too far into proposing Richmond as the model, we do have to have the young people at lead in shaping the thing. So it's kind of always that push and pull of having some real substance to what we're bringing to potential stakeholders, and then also not going too far that, you know, we're not actually inviting their feedback and participation, just kind of handing what the thing is. So, right, I think that there are portions in this that are worthy of our using as a model, and that, as Chris was saying, it is helpful to have something that we're working off, to take the parts that we want and leave the ones we don't. That all said, invite comments from other folks on this call about basically this is a potential model, and or whether we would have maybe more input from somebody who knows better about this program and how it's rolling out in Richmond, to kind of get a sense of when we like parts or don't like certain parts, how informed that is of how it's rolling out in practice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's definitely something that we can follow up on to get that sort of feedback. Again, we definitely want to have young people be a part of the process. I think part of the issue that we're running into is that we don't want to begin like all of these activities and then not have this go through, or not have it be approved or actually happen, and then, you know, young people will spend a significant amount of time on it. And so I think, you know, you're right that there's a sort of a delicate dance, right, or a balance that we have to strike between sort of having some language like this, receiving as much input as we possibly can from young people, especially the few that folks from the RISE Center, you know, are you know, working with or helping to you know, to bridge us in with as far as being part of this. And then, you know, to figure out what they have to say, how we can reflect it in this, but still make sure that it's something that makes sense in terms of a proposal that goes up from there. But that's what we're going to do. That's what we have to do in terms of sort of having a structure, but wanting to hear directly from and be reflective of what young people have to say.
Thanks, Chris. And right, Kiki's comment in the chat. I guess I'd say that my sense of it, of where we are, is that it would be a separate body from our job, and that it would be kind of like a parallel separate group that has its own ability to set agendas and make requests of staff, et cetera. But that we would kind of be the launching pad perhaps for it to be created. And Chris, if you have other thoughts on that, I invite you. And then next hand is Gigi on this. Does that sound okay? Right, in terms of we're envisioning this as a separate group from our job, is that we would be creating it or helping launch, but that ultimately it would be a separate entity.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I mean, those sound like discussions that we've had. I mean, I think these are all questions that may, you know, the answers to them may change. You know, Jill just dropped something in the chat, right? Like that also may color the way that this looks. So I think all of those things are still being decided. What we know essentially is that young people need a space that's not with all of us adult, structured, logical, boring people who sit in meetings like this all the time, where they actually feel comfortable talking about how they feel and what they actually want, and how to, you know, make that impression upon the folks who have the ability to make decisions that reflect that.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Gigi, please.
Thank you. I always like to speak up for who's not in the room. And if I was a youth that lived in the eastern part of the county, where the bulk of the youth now that are incarcerated live, from Pittsburgh and Antioch, not Richmond anymore, possibly because Richmond does have a rice center and there's preventative services there that we don't have here in the eastern part of the county. I would just hope that whatever we do keeps in mind who will be using it, and that there's a different culture from city to city. And when I go to Richmond, I feel, as an African-American, I feel the culture, I feel the difference. And so in many of the individuals who now live in the eastern part of the county who don't have the resources are struggling because they don't have the preventative services. So I'm just hoping that, you know, anything that we lift is really inclusive and targets those most harmed by not having access to preventative programs. We're lifting up through funding from the Measure X, 2 youth centers, one in the central and one in east. And I'm hoping that it has the same type of support and care that we always give to the Rice Center. And I'll just be honest, when I ask young people, you know, about going to the Rice Center, some of the African-American youth that are male don't find a connection to the Rice Center. That just comes with the territory. So we have to design something that will work for them, that meets their need, that's led by people that look like them. Oh, I said it.
Thank you, Gigi. Let me see if there's any other comment, feedback on this, knowing that for the reasons we've talked about, there's only so far we go toward shaping it. We and kind of move hand in hand, knowing that this is steps toward what will ultimately be, and that I think I'm getting a general sense that the content of the Richmond program could be the basis of the starting of a model, and we'll let it digest further before we try to go into the details of, and know that this smaller working group will be working on moving this to the next stage of a proposal. Yes, sound good? Okay, unless there are other comments on this part or feedback on this, I think, yes, that we do need to. Good context from Melvin there. East County almost double to supervision juvenile enrichment as well. That's consistent with the anecdotal stuff I've been from different sources. And so we got detail from probation to know that that's the case. Okay. I do think we should move to schedule and then try to come back to our final, our community capacity fund. And I'll just frame that to say, we'll come back to community capacity fund if in fact we can. And we have the beginnings of a model there. You can tell that much of it is lifted, and I give full credit to and respect to Jewel Legacy Group for their eval of the program that happened in the AB 109 context, basically in that draft of the community capacity fund. That did a lot of trying to take from their takeaways and recommendations and incorporate those into our proposal. But let's leave that for a second and jump to agenda item number 7, if we may, which is to talk about schedule moving forward. And we talked last time, can't take that call. We talked last time about the concept of moving to every other month, because we've been moving monthly. And I'll say, I remember when this was coming up initially that I was in favor of moving monthly to having this every month, because, right, my sense had been the work is too important. We let too much time go between. We're not going to be able to respond to the things that are happening on the ground, and stuff gets lost and we don't have the chance to make action on it for another 2 months. It just seems too long for things that are urgent. Also, now in practice, seeing that, yeah, it's pretty common that we don't hit all the things on the agenda. And it's true that things that we were hoping to have action taken on, let's develop this proposal, let's have this group meet, whatever it may be. If we're doing that month to month with other demands, it is somewhat common that we have didn't have a chance to get to that this month, and we'll bring it back next month. So, right, it's not good to have monthly meetings if it's a regular thing that we're not adequately prepared to take action. On the other hand, I would be very sad to see if it were the same situation we did every other month, right? If we come back every 2 months and then we're saying didn't have a chance to get to this, well, that would be worse. So that said, I think that it's not an unreasonable proposal and that maybe it is the best meeting the needs, the most efficiency, most effective to go to every other month. I'm interested to know people's perspective on this because I do think less frequent than that would really be a problem. And that degree of frequency may be striking the balance between adequate preparation, time to do the work, and not going too far between the meetings. Having said that, let me invite Gigi to give comment.
Well, I mean, if I had a young person incarcerated, I would think that a month, if this is a group that's going to be looking at how do we best serve them, that anything less than once a month wouldn't be enough. And this is a public meeting, and I don't know if we ever have any family members or loved ones participate, but if they knew about it, I bet you I'd be able to get quite a few people here. So I would think that going to every other month would not be treating this meeting with the urgency that it should have. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment, Gigi. Right, so that first, my initial instinct on this was to be saying, let's do it that often. And to your point, we have had at least, there was regular participation from a mother of a young person in custody. And so, right, the urgency with wanting to take action, I certainly remember her having that degree of urgency, and that this also speaks to the issues that we've talked about in this group before of the accessibility of these meetings happening during the middle of the day, loved ones of people who are in custody and their ability to engage and participate. So all of that is part of the question too, is if you make it less frequent and it's in the middle of the workday, that really might be impossible for loved ones, as opposed to, well, I can't make this one, I can make the one 4 weeks from now. So that's some response I'm having to what you've just added, Gigi, and let me ask Chris to weigh in.
Yeah, so really quick, I think here's the thing, right? When it comes to these meetings, back to sort of Jeff's original points, I think we have been equating these meetings with this very important work, right? And in a way, obviously that makes a lot of sense, except in any meeting I've been in, right? This is not the only jurisdiction that I do this work in. The work doesn't happen here. This is where you talk about what you've done. But you do that work outside of this meeting space, and then you come back and you share what has been accomplished. And so for this group, particularly at 3 subcommittees, which essentially take up 3 weeks out of every month, right? Depending on, folks who have to attend all 3, you're showing up so frequently that whatever you're saying you're gonna do, right? There's not even just, in any one particular space, but folks who, tend to show up to multiple subcommittees and might say, I'm going to do X or I'm going to be responsible for Y. When the next month comes up, usually that's not something that they've been able to do, because it sounds, doable when you say it in the moment. But if you're meeting essentially every week, right, which these subcommittees almost are, then if you're not doing that thing that you claimed you were going to do by the end of the next day, then you've run into an issue. I don't know what's going on there. Sorry, I hope you guys didn't hear the horn in the background. But so I think 2 things, right? The work is extremely important and it's extremely urgent. And I think it's because of that, right, that there's a need to put more focus on those meetings that happen in between these spaces where that work actually happens. So that there's more of a step forward in every meeting. And that does not mean that there won't be space, right? Even on a monthly basis, perhaps, for people to show up if they want to be a part of those conversations, right? So I talked about there's a working group that is trying to help develop the Youth Advisory Council and sort of do that work and get young people involved in that space. That's a space, right, where if there were particularly community members, right, particularly folks who were not necessarily members of this body for quorum purposes, and they wanted to show up there, they would be more than welcome to show up there and to give input. There just might not be an our job subcommittee meeting way when we show up, say, for example, it's November. So if we show up in January, right, we're able to say, here are the things that we've done to push this forward. We want to hear what you guys have to say about them and then move things forward further, as opposed to showing up and saying, even if a parent is attending, right, and they do feel urgent about their young person, what exactly had we done to address that urgency, right, in these spaces as they currently stand? So that's sort of the question, trying to figure out that balance and make sure that we're actually getting some work done. And generally speaking, again, that work happens not in these meeting spaces, but in between these meeting spaces and in places that are not so sort of geared toward report outs, right? Public report outs, and more toward how do we put the details together in ways that nobody would want to watch, even on a county YouTube website, because there's no real discussion as much as there's like language and number crunching and that sort of thing. So I think that's sort of what led to these types of questions coming up. It's not the first time it's come up, and we'll find a way to move forward regardless of what you guys decide, but just wanted to provide that context.
Thanks, Chris. And Gigi, I see your hand. I just wanted to give my quick feedback to say that, all right, well, it's important for me to acknowledge that I'm not going to be on the our job moving forward, right? That those spots are going to be filled by other folks from the coalition. And part of that has to do with, in a way, my feeling that if I can get the work done between monthly meetings, then I shouldn't be on this group, right? Because the work is that important. You got to get things done between these meetings. And that's easy for me to say, right? Because I'm now saying part of my reflection is that I don't have the time to do this important work in the way that I think needs to happen. And if GGU or others that are in this group are feeling like, well, I do have that bandwidth to get this work done between those monthly meetings, and it will happen, then right, that's a different degree of readiness and ability and all those factors. So my 2 cents on that. And Gigi, your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I've sent out probably 6 emails and responded to phone calls while I've been on this, because it's so important to me, because so many family members call me who have loved ones who they feel should be getting treatment instead of being jailed. I feel a level of urgency, and because we're shifting to a new approach, if we're going to be monitoring the progress of that, I think meeting once a month to see how it's going, especially now, is important. I know there's other committees, but this one has a particular focus that is looking at how are we going to reduce the disparities? How are we going to give these youth an opportunity to heal? Because that's the terminology I use, right? Because I'm saying most of them live with mental illness. And I feel like waiting 2 months for something so important makes it easier for people to miss meetings. And when you have a regular time, you tend to put it in your calendar if it's important to you and you show up. That's just the approach that I've taken. But I'm also someone who gets phone calls every day from family members who have young people who I feel should be getting mental health treatment and not getting criminalized.
Thank you, Gigi. Okay, so I look at where we are with time, and we've had comment on this, and I think that there are, I know that the folks that are on this call, the people who are speaking, all have the focus of how can we be the most effective here? How can we be doing the work and achieving the things that we want, which is reducing these disparities, eliminating these disparities, having more racial justice in our county. So with that in mind, and knowing that we have that North Star as we work on this work plan, this subcommittee, I suppose at 4:30, I'm going to suggest that we do meet next month. And that when we do meet next month, we will make priority of this to determine how are we moving forward. And I think it would also be good practice to have nomination consideration of who will be chairing the subcommittee next in this next phase, so that we can have a little bit of that transition time and consideration. And if there's a determination that that next meeting to move to every other month, then that would be moving forward from then. So that's my suggestion, absent our taking a vote to have a change in the schedule. Feeling like yes? Okay, that's where we are. That would give us a meeting, let's see, December.
So it would be December 8th, same
Yes,
time.
exactly. And we're a minute past. I thank everyone for their hard work, attention, and work on this being together. Patrice, you unmuted. Is there anything you wanted to say?
Oh, sorry.
No,
No,
you're good.
good to see everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good night.